and I've got 5 games I'm going to be profiling today. And after I'm done with that, we'll then talk about games that I personally pledged from the last video, games that I've acquired during this period, which happens to be 0, so there will be no games in that category of this video, and then games that I've played, of which there's only 1, which means this is going to be a shorter video this period, but that's probably to be expected because I'm now doing these on the weekly. So if you like this video, come back in a week, next Friday, there'll be another one, and so on and so on and so on. Also, I'll have a brief channel update at the very end of this video if you want to know what videos will be coming from me in the next week, and beyond that as well. But without further ado, let's take a look at the very first game on the list, and that is Oros. So Oros will complete its funding on August 11th. They had a minimum funding goal of $20,000 for this. They're sitting at about $192,000 right now as I film this, which is about 9.5 times the requested minimum funding. Now the game plays 1 to 4 players. It's supposed to play in about 1 to 2 hours. I'm not quite sure how to class this one in terms of complexity yet. It's somewhere in the medium range. I'm going to say medium light, but I could see it possibly be leaning into the medium heavy. I'm just not quite sure from what I've seen. I probably need to play it first, but I think it's medium light. I'd put the risk on this one at high. And the reason for that is it's first time everybody, first time artist, first time designer, first time publisher. So even though it looks really good, and it does look really good, and it looks like it has great components, really shiny components that are very appealing and fun gameplay, probably for gamers of all complexities, but a little on the light side. It is an unknown quantity in terms of the people behind it. They've never done this before. They've never done a Kickstarter before, so higher risk than most. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to pull it off and put out a brilliant game and deliver it on time or as close to on time as they can during what's happening right now with global shipping. They may do all of that. It may be amazing. But again, higher risk. So what kind of game is this? Well, it's described on BGG as a worker placement game. However, I really don't think that is accurate. And the reason why, there's a situation on the player boards where you're choosing different actions and you just can't take the same actions that you chose before. So in that case, it feels like there's something being blocked like a worker placement game, but it is just on your player board. It's not on the main board. So as you're taking those actions and you're trying to take actions that haven't been taken before, you aren't dealing with the intrusion of other players. So you're not competing for worker placement spaces with other players. It's kind of like Scythe, I guess, in that regard. You're taking actions on your player board, but only you are dealing with your player board. So I really wouldn't call it as worker placement, but probably more action selection. And generally what you're doing by taking those various actions on your player board, which is pretty complex. There's a lot to do on the player board with a lot of unlockables and a lot of things that lead to other things. But what you're going to be doing with those movements that you're activating is moving around tiles on the main board. And that is a main board filled with tiles. I really wouldn't call it tile placement though, because you're not placing tiles out on the board. You're just moving around what's there. You are, however, building certain buildings that you may place on them. And sometimes those buildings and structures come in the form of tiles. So maybe it is tile placement to some degree as well. But you are moving around a lot of these physical tiles on the board through various actions, trying to create situations of area control that are more towards your advantage. And you'll be doing the same thing with the tiles that you're placing and the kind of buildings that you're building. It's sort of a medium light tile placement and tile adjustment game that heavily uses actions on player boards and action selection, and it's just filled with bright components and tiles, and it looks very attractive and appealing. So in terms of who made this game, the designer and artist are the same person. That's Brant Brinkerhoff. And if the game ends up being as fantastic as it looks, we can give him full credit. Also, the publisher is called AESC Games, AESC, and this is their very first game that they're publishing. It's their very first Kickstarter that they're running. And again, it's Brant Brinkerhoff's company. So this is all Brant all the time. And he is going to be solely responsible for how this game comes off. But if it comes off as well as it is looking to, I think he's going to be establishing a firm foothold in the publishing world and the designer world with this game, because it looks pretty cool. Now let's talk about pledge levels. Okay, for $50, you can get the standard edition of this game. For $75, you can get the collector's edition. Now, in the collector's edition, you will add on to the standard edition with these things. A UV spot on the box, a land tile expansion that has 24 tiles. So that will be more tiles that will go out on the main board, or that can go out on the main board. Now, just to give you an idea of how expansive that 24 tile expansion is, the main game has 72 tiles. So 24 tiles is a third of 72, or once you've thrown it into the game, 25%. So it is a not insubstantial amount of tiles. It will significantly change the variability and variety of the tiles in the game. You've also got player tokens and a Jade Jaguar token that will be included in the collector's edition. So I think in the other edition they are standees. In this version, they're wooden markers and they have a heat transfer pattern that's on them. Also, there's something called sacred sites. These are tiles that you're going to place on the tiles. I believe that they are cardboard tiles in the standard version. And I know that in the collector's edition, they are, again, wooden tiles that have had heat transfer graphics applied to them. Also in the collector's edition, you get a tray system. It looks like a Game Trays insert, but it's not Game Trays. It's by a different company called Blackout, but it is comparable from what I can tell by looking at 2 Game Trays. It's just not Game Trays. And I know there is a 5th stretch goal that will go into the collector's edition that, as of the time of this filming, has not been revealed yet. There may be more in the remaining few days of the campaign, but there will at least be one more thing that goes into that collector's edition. Now, there are a few other pledge levels in this one. I don't talk about pledges that just have multiple copies of the game or pledges that are aimed at retailers. There's also a couple of very high pledge levels on this one at the $750 and $1,500 level. I'm not going to go into those. Generally, those kinds of pledge levels are just for people who really believe in the project and kind of want to throw charity dollars at the project. And oftentimes it includes things that I call vanity rewards, which usually include something like your likeness, your image being drawn on a card or perhaps on the board or something. Sometimes that means that those cards are going to go into everybody's copies. Sometimes they've done something to personalize the game for you specifically so that it only affects your copy. I don't think either of those things are part of these kind of high pledge levels. However, they are including like multiple copies of the game along with production copies of the game. I believe free shipping. One of them has like you get to play the game with the designer, things like that. So if you want to pledge those pledge levels, go for it. But I'm not going to break those pledge levels down or talk about them and the specifics of them here. So just know that they're there. If you really like the game, you want to go crazy, you want to throw a lot of money at the designers, go check those out. And finally, Oros is looking to deliver in October of 2022. Now, on August 12th, there are 3 games that are going to be completing their funding. The first of those is Architects of the West Kingdom, Works of Wonder. Now, this campaign has done very well. They estimated their minimum funding goal at $16,000, but they're currently sitting at $466,000, which is about 29 times their minimum requested funding. So it's doing really well. I think they may have lowballed that minimum funding, but it doesn't matter. They're doing very well. Now, this can play 1 to 5 players, which I feel like I should mention because the previous expansion for Architects of the West Kingdom, which was called Age of Artisans, that brought the player count up to 6. However, this expansion only plays at 5. So if you want to throw this one into your games, you're going to need to keep your player count at 5. So it's a 1 to 5 player game. It's supposed to play in about 1 to 1.5 hours. This is, again, a medium game, but I'd say this one kind of leans on the medium-heavy side. And Garpel Games has done a ton of Kickstarters. They're always really good about their campaigns. On top of that, they always have their shipping set at a $10, just kind of flat shipping. So they really kind of subsidize the shipping and take it out of their end. So there's less to think about and less to worry about. Especially right now with what's happening with worldwide shipping with Garpel Games Kickstarters. So Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game. Now, Garpel Games did their first trilogy. It was the Of the North Sea games. They did Explorers of the North Sea, Shipwrights of the North Sea, and Raiders of the North Sea. Raiders of the North Sea was probably the big hit of that bunch, although Explorers is really good too. But Explorers is a tile placement game, whereas Raiders is worker placement. So they then went on to do these Of the West Kingdom games, and all three of them are worker placement games. What makes Architects unique, though, is something called the capture mechanic. So a lot of the locations in the game will have you placing your worker out, and then the more workers you place out later on future turns will give you increasingly more of whatever that resource or ability is. So you're playing this game where you're putting workers maybe on the same spaces, trying to get larger and larger amounts of stuff. But at any time, someone could come along and capture all your workers in one space and send them to the jail. And then you have to engage with those mechanics to eventually get your workers back from the jail. And that is just something that players need to factor into their game. It becomes very prevalent within the mechanics of the game because you're always sort of doing this mental math and figuring out, okay, how many of one resource do I get? And if I'm going to get an additional one every time I go there, how many times do I need to go there to get all of the wood that I need? And at the same time, how many times can I go there before someone's going to realize that my turns are getting too good in terms of the resources I'm getting, and it's just going to send all my people to jail? So that's kind of what makes Architects different and unique from those other worker placement games. Now, this expansion adds some just kind of more things, like more cards, more of this, more of that, just to give you more variability in the game, but it also adds a few things that are different that kind of add in new mechanics. One of them are new player boards with new advanced abilities. And most of them will likely play off of some of the other new mechanics in this expansion, which are wonders that you'll be building in addition to everything else that you're doing, and a couple of wooden, like NPC characters that you'll be moving around the board. And when they're in certain places, they will supplement what you're getting there. So they may give you bonus things, they may cause penalties if people capture things are there. They may reward people for capturing things that are there. So both the Wonders and the Prince and Profiteer are going to add new mechanics into the game, as well as just the variability that comes from the additional stuff. So the game was designed by Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald. They've been working together on all of the West Kingdom series. Shem Phillips basically did the Of the North Sea series by himself, and then he went on to launch a future-themed series called Circadians. And there's only been one game so far, but that game was designed by S.J. McDonald. That was called Circadians First Light. And the plan is for that game to also be a trilogy. And I think that Shem and SJ got along so well. SJ started helping out Shem on the Of the West Kingdom series, and so they have co-designed all of the games in the series and the expansions and stuff like that. So Shem Phillips as a designer is best known for Architects of the West Kingdom, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Viscounts of the West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea, and Raiders of Scythia. Whereas S.J. McDonald is best known for Architects of the West Kingdom, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and Circadians First Light. And the artist on this is the same artist that's worked on all of these games, and his name is Mahalo Dmitrievsky, also known as the Miko. His most well-known games are also Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and Raiders of the North Sea, but he's also worked on some other games, and one of those has risen above some of the Garpel games on BGG's ranking. So the fifth game of his that is the most popular is Valeria Card Kingdoms. And he's done all the games in those series too. So if you like his style and you like card games, maybe go check out those as well. Now, as I've mentioned, this game is published by Garpel Games. It's Shem Phillips' company. So the 5 games that Garpel has had the biggest successes with are, again, Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea, and Raiders of Scythia. Now, if you have all the other stuff and you just want the new expansion, the pledge level you're going to want is for $27,000. The pledge level that you want is for $27. That would be a big pledge. $27. And it's called the Apprentice Pledge level, and that just includes Works of Wonder. Now, if you want to kind of bling it out and you have the Architect's base game, and maybe you have Age of Artisans, which is the previous expansion, for $71, you can pledge at the Architect level, which will also include a collector's box that will hold everything, as well as a nice big playmat, kind of on the level of the Raiders of the North Sea playmat. Now, if you're new to this series, So maybe you're familiar with the Of the North Sea games and you like those, but you haven't yet invested in any of the West Kingdom games. You can pledge at the $314 pledge level. It's called King, and that will get you everything in the Of the West Kingdom series. So you'll get all 3 base games, Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts. You'll get Crown of Kings, which is the Paladins of the West Kingdom expansion that recently had a Kickstarter. You'll also get Age of Artisans, which is the previous expansion for Architects of the West Kingdom, as well as this new expansion. You'll be getting the Collector's Box and the playmat for Architects. You'll also get a collector's box for Paladins because that had one made as well. And there are also several sets of promos that you'll get. So in 2018, when they did the original Architects of the West Kingdom Kickstarter, there was a set of promos that ran with that. You'll get those. You'll also get the 2019 promos that were offered as a part of the Paladins of the West Kingdom Kickstarter. And you'll get Tome Saga of the West Kingdom, which is a module that connects all 3 games. So you can play all 3 games as kind of a campaign, and there'll be goals to do in each game based on what you've randomly pulled out of Tome Saga. So however well the player does in each game, they'll also be trying to collect these tomes for additional achievements. And then at the end, across all 3 games, you'll see who got the most tomes and what points those are worth, and there'll be someone crowned an overall winner for the entire campaign of 3 games. So you'll get Tome Saga, and you'll also get a promo set that came with Tome Saga. And finally, this latest campaign in the Of the West Kingdom line is looking to deliver in May of 2022. That brings us to Bantam West, which also is going to fund on August 12th. Now, they had a minimum required funding goal of $40,000, but they're currently sitting on $196,000, which is a little bit under 5 times their minimum requested funding. Bantam West plays at 2 to 4 players. According to the publisher, it should play in about 1 to 3 hours per session. This is another one that's kind of sitting on this line where I'm unsure of how to characterize the complexity because there's no rule book. But for all the things in the game, it's obviously a medium range game, but for all the things in it, I think we're looking at a medium heavy game. And this is going to be the second high risk game of this video because this game is also produced by a first time designer, artist, and publisher. So everybody's new. What they're doing looks really cool to me, but they're new. So things may have a greater chance of going wrong, but it looks cool. Why? What is it? Well, it's an immersive sim adventure board game with a Western theme. That's how the publishers describe it anyway. It has fighting, it has miniatures, it has action points and worker placement. It also has a market, a modular board, and to me, when I look at it, it reminds me of something like Western Legends, but it also does have kind of Euro elements in it and kind of engine building. And I think it really is what you might expect from sort of a video game sim, where it's going to have that kind of like open world feeling that Western Legends has, where you can kind of go around and do things, do what you want. But just like in a computerized sim game, you are going to kind of be building up what you're doing, your abilities, your resources, things like that. It looks really cool to me. And I think if it comes off well, if it's, you know, as good as it looks once it's done and it's produced, at least for me, this would be the game that I would 100% play anytime over Western Legends. I think, for me anyway, if this kind of comes off as I think it will, it'll just be a Western Legends killer because it'll do all the things that Western Legends does, but it'll have a lot more going on and it'll have Euro elements in it, which I like for me personally. You may like the simplicity of Western Legends, but for me, I guess I want more meat on the bone, and this looks like it's going to have a lot of meat and be very cool. So let's mention the people involved, even though for all of them, this is their first game, so I don't have credits to talk to you about to give you an idea of what their work is like. The designer on this is Ike Brunicardi. It's his first game. It's also his company here now that's publishing the game. There are 4 different artists working on it. There may be more actually working on it, but there are 4 that are predominantly listed here. So they are Philippe Ferreira, Mitch Mueller, One Pixel Brush, and Than Tuin. And then the company, the publisher, is Bantam West. Again, that's Ike's company, and it's named after this game. This is the first game that they're publishing. And this is why this is a high risk, just because everybody's doing this for the first time, including running a Kickstarter. Now, pledge levels on this one. So for $97, there's a pledge level called Home of the Brave. That is your base standard edition. For $150, there's a pledge level called the Shadow Governors, and that's going to throw in a bunch of extras that aren't in the previous pledge level, and that will include metal coins, a terrain upgrade pack, an upgraded first player token, a collectible postcard, and then the stretch goals that are called the Green Star stretch goals. Now, I've looked through the campaign, and as of right now, the only stretch goal that I can identify that's part of that is a game trays insert system. There may be more coming. There probably is more coming, but that's going to depend, how it gets funded moving on and what they unlock. And then finally, Bantam West is looking to deliver in December 2022. So that brings us to the last game that is going to be finishing its funding on August 12th, and that is Divinus. Now, Divinus had a minimum required funding goal of $29,000. They're doing very well. This is Lucky Duck Games. It's the same company that makes the Chronicles of Crime series and had a big hit earlier this year with Destiny, so that's probably why. So they're currently sitting at $280,000. Which is about 9.5 times their minimum requested funding. So Divinus is designed to play at 2 to 4 players, which is a little bit different than Destiny's, which was 2 to 3. So they have a 4th player in this one. And like Destiny's, it has a bunch of scenarios that you can play. The scenarios in this one are designed to play in about an hour. And much of this is kind of similar to Destiny's, I think, not necessarily in terms of all of the mechanics, and we'll talk about that in a second, but in terms of the overall design structure. So that's going to put the complexity of this one as medium-low. It is app-based. You are going to be using an app for that, and the app will do some of the kind of behind-the-scenes work, which makes it a little easier and simpler to use for the players. But that does mean that it is app-dependent. And then as far as the risk on this goes, seeing as how well Lucky Duck Games has been doing lately and delivering things and creating great stuff, I think the risk on this is low. Now, this is described as a competitive legacy tile-laying digital hybrid game. So the digital hybrid part is talking about the app. The tile-laying I don't think is that important for us to know about. I mean, you are placing tiles out on the board as you're doing things, much like in Destiny's. But I think what's important here is this competitive legacy element. So Destiny's was also competitive, which is interesting for a game like this because usually they're cooperative. So Lucky Duck is obviously kind of doubling down and moving forward with the kind of app-based competitive gameplay. But how they're changing things up from Destiny's. Destiny's was a campaign game, and I was a little disappointed with Destiny's because the gameplay is so limited. Once you play through a game, you kind of know how different things are going to happen because everything's scripted. It's not very random. So yes, you can play with a different character another time. However, you're going to know things about how various mechanics in the game work more than other players, so it's not really fair. You almost would need to play the game even when you're playing another character, playing with other players who've played it before and then kind of all just shift and take a new character. But other than that, it is kind of like a mystery game where you know some of the mystery, you know some of the answers, you can't really play it again. This, I think, is designed to be the next step of that. So there are a couple different campaigns in here. There is one with the base game. There's another one that's an additional expansion add-on. It's called Shadows of Yggdrasil. And both of those are a campaign unto itself that plays like a legacy campaign. So you're going to be putting stickers on the board and doing things that change the game. However, any level that you pledge at will include a recharge pack for that thing. So if you're just buying the base game, you will automatically get a recharge pack for the base game. You can add on more recharge packs if you think you're going to want to play the campaign many times. And I'm sure that in the future, you'll be able to go to Lucky Duck's website and buy the recharge packs there because they're pretty good about selling things through their website. So if you don't get enough recharge packs and you find you want to play the campaign through an additional time later on, I think you'll be able to get more of those recharge packs later. But they are included, one of them, in whatever iteration you get. So that allows you to play it at least twice. And obviously, in order to do that, that means that it won't be a thing where everything is scripted and you know everything after you play a scenario once. So there will be kind of more randomization in the app. So that's good. It allows more gameplay. In the base box, the campaign that's provided there is a 12 scenario campaign. In Shadows of Yggdrasil, it is an 8 scenario campaign. And then there are other one-offs that are being unlocked as stretch goals. So those are going to be collected together mostly in an expansion, a stretch goals expansion called Pandora's Box. But none of the scenarios in Pandora's Box will need a reset pack because all of those will be one-offs. They'll just be one scenario. So you play it, you finish it, you don't need to change anything on the board because there isn't another scenario. And it looks like, so far anyway, there will be 5 scenarios in Pandora's Box. But there could be more depending on what happens with the stretch goals that unlock. And then finally, there is something called an eternal mode. Once you're done with the campaigns, you can do something to make the game just unlimited replayable. I haven't looked that deeply into it because I don't want to spoil a lot of the game for myself, but I have a feeling that when you do that, the campaigns will then kind of be interrupted. Like, I don't think you'll be able to play a campaign and be doing things to the board and also be playing the eternal mode. So I think the eternal mode is something that you're going to want to do after you've played however many campaigns you want to play, and then you can kind of just have the game throwing all the stuff in the box together and having it be this kind of big sandboxy experience that you can play again and again and again. And I suppose at some point you could say, okay, I'm getting tired of this. Let me go to Lucky Duck Games website, order another recharge pack, and we'll just reset stuff and play another campaign. So that's my take on it. But as I said, I haven't done a super deep dive into the information on the Kickstarter because I'm trying not to spoil stuff. So the designer on this is Philip Nolunsky. He previously worked on a cool little kind of life sim game that's very kind of hard card heavy called CV. Also Destinies, which I've referenced a lot, and a game called Warsaw City of Ruins. Now there are 3 artists credited on this one. I may botch the names, so bear with me. But the first artist is Matijos Jabrisilasi, and he has previously worked on Chronicles of Crime, Chronicles of Crime 1900, and Dinosaur Tea Party. Also, Carolina Jedrajak, who has previously worked on Chronicles of Crime 1900, Destinies, and Tussie Mussie, which is a cool little card game put out by Button Shy Games, designed by Elizabeth Hargrave of Wingspan fame. And lastly, Mateus Kamada, who has previously worked on Chronicles of Crime 1400, and another Lucky Duck game, early game of theirs called Vikings Gone Wild. And Lucky Duck Games themselves are probably best known for Chronicles of Crime, Destinies, and Vikings Gone Wild. So let's talk about pledge levels on this one, shall we? For $70, you can pledge the Demigod Pledge. That is just going to get you the base game and a recharge pack for the base game and the Pandora's Box expansion, which, as I said, will have one-off scenarios, and we're looking at 5 right now. So you'll get the base game with 12 scenarios, and then you'll get 5, possibly more one-off scenarios. If you pledge $116, the Godly Pledge, you'll get those same things, but you will also get the Shadows of Yggdrasil expansion and a recharge pack for that one. And again, that campaign has 8 scenarios. And both the base game campaign and Shadows of Yggdrasil, the campaign functions like a legacy campaign. Now, the biggest pledge level here is the $141 Chest of Plenty Pledge. And that is going to throw in 1 additional myth, which is why I'm a little bit unsure of how many of those myths are going to the Pandora's pack, because they state in the campaign that almost all of them are, but I think one of them is being reserved for this Chest of Plenty, which means it may be 4 scenarios in the Pandora's Box instead of 5, but there's still more time to unlock stuff, so it may go back up to 5. It may even go up to 6, but there will be a one-off scenario that is reserved just for the Chest of Plenty Pledge. The other thing that you'll get in the Chest of Plenty Pledge are miniatures. So if you get previous versions of the game, they're going to be cardboard standee only. If you want the miniature experience, you need to get the Chest of Plenty. And then finally, if you want to get more recharge packs, there will be some things available as add-ons. One of those is an additional dice set if you just want to have more dice so that people don't have to share. But also there are recharge packs. So you can get additional recharge packs, however many you want, for either the base game and or Shadows of Yggdrasil, and those go about $12 each. But remember, at any pledge level, you're automatically going to be getting one of them. So unless you already know you're going to want to play these legacy campaigns more than twice, I would say don't worry about getting more packs. and just get them in the future through Lucky Duck Games' website if that's something you decide that you want down the road. And finally, Divinus will be delivering, hopefully, tentatively, barring everything that's happening with worldwide shipping, in September 2022. Now that brings us to the last game on this list, and that is called Pirates. And that will fund on August 14th. Now, Pirates had a minimum required funding goal of $5,000, very low. They're currently sitting at $12,500, which is about 2.5 times their minimum requested funding. Pirates plays 3 to 5 players, so that's something you should know. It does not play at 2-player. There is no solo game. It is a 3 to 5 player game. It's supposed to play in about 30 to 45 minutes. It is a light game, and Queen Games is a solid publisher. They've been around forever. They're not huge. They actually don't have that many employees, but they're a solid publisher, has been around a long time, and they're very solid, so I put the risk on this one at low. Now, a couple things to know about Pirates. So this is the 3rd iteration of this game. Same designer. He's designed all 3 games. They're just basically a reskinning. I don't know personally how much the game changes mechanically. I don't think that much. Maybe a little, but essentially I believe it's a reskinning. So the first version of this game has a German name. It's called Die Safenacker. And then it was redone by Queen Games. So the first version was not done through Queen Games. It was redone through Queen Games with a different artist, and it was called Buccaneer. And then now Queen Games is doing it again. So it's the 2nd time for them, the 3rd time for the game. It is being rethemed by the artist and with the theme and style of a comic book called Bonnie Lass. So the retheme is done to bring this game into the Bonnie Lass universe. And essentially this is an auction bidding game. Players are pirates. They're going to be trying to accumulate things like ships and treasure and sea monsters. There's a mechanic where they can mutiny that will kind of affect what's happening with the bidding, but it is a light auction bidding game. It is designed by Stephen Dora, who designed the other 2 iterations, and he is probably best known for Sale, Medina, and Turn the Tide. And the artist on this is Michael Main. And as I said, Michael Main is the artist for this comic book called Bonnie Lass, but this is his first board game. And then finally, it's published by Queen Games. And Queen Games is best known for Marigo, Chicago Express, Fresco, Lancaster, and Shogun. So there are a lot of pledge levels on this one, and only a couple of them include Pirates, because Queen Games is using this Kickstarter to also offer up some of their other games that they've also had Kickstarters on lately. It probably comes down to them just having a lot of extra stock of those games, but there aren't limits on those tiers. It's not like they're limited to a certain number of copies. So for $35, you can pledge for Pirates. And also I should make note that none of these pledge levels have extras. You're just kind of getting the game. So $35, Pirates. You can also pledge at the $35 level for a game called Lupos. There's also a $59 pledge level that combines both of those games, so you would get Pirates and Lupos. It is called the Early Bird. There's only 200 of those available. However, at the time that I'm filming this, there's still 125 left, I think. It's either 125 left or 75 left, but I think it's 125 left. So at that price, $59, you're gonna get both games. And if you do want that, I would say just go back that quickly before those disappear. However, if you want both games, and that pledge level disappears, there is another pledge level that has both of those games. It's just not an early bird special. It's $10 more, it's $69. So you can still get both games. It's just, if you don't get there fast enough, you're gonna be paying $69 instead of $59. And then they have 2 more games that are each available at a $140 pledge level. That is the Fresco Big Box and the Merlin Big Box. So you can pledge either one of those. And to be honest, the reason that I am most interested in this campaign is not for Pirates, but it's for the Merlin Big Box, which is hard to find anywhere else right now, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. And Queen Games is kind of notorious for just making it feels like 10-year-old, 15-year-old games that just use a lot of cardboard. They aren't quite as tricked out and shiny as a lot of these new games. However, if you get either of these big boxes, they come with a very nice game trays insert system. So it feels like Queen Games is trying to take a few small tentative steps into kind of current level Kickstarters with these game trays inserts for these games. So the thing that I'm actually considering pledging here personally out of this is the Merlin big box. And then finally, there are a couple of other games that they list that they don't have pledge levels for. So they're going to be available as add-ons in the Pledge Manager. And that is Scrap Racer for $65 or Cocopelli for $60. Cocopelli actually looks pretty compelling to me. I don't think I'm going to add that one on to my pledge just because I've been ordering too many games lately, but if I did add something on, it would probably be Cocopelli. And I believe that also means that all of the other games that we're talking about can also be added on in the Pledge Manager. But those are the pledges that you can actually pledge as a part of this campaign. And finally, Pirates and any of these other games that you order will be fulfilled, hopefully, tentatively. Queen Games is shooting for it in November 2021. Okay, so that concludes the currently running Kickstarter section and brings us into the pledged game section. So what did I actually pledge from the last video? Well, 2 games. The first was Chronicles of Drunagor, Age of Darkness Apocalypse. It's a long name and it's a pretty expansive pledge. I got the all-in, so that includes everything from the first game with all of the bells and whistles and the expansion content with all of those bells and whistles. And it is a monster. It is massive. It's pretty expensive, but I like campaign games. I've heard really good things about the first one. I didn't pledge the first one, the base game, when it was originally up on Kickstarter because there were so many other good things at the time and it just kind of passed me by. So now is my opportunity to go on and get it. I'm excited to play it, and I think it'll also be a great game to feature on our Twitch channel, which hasn't launched yet, but will be hopefully later in the year. So I am backing it, partly thinking that I can use it for content on the Twitch channel. And I also backed Soul Raiders, which is an interesting looking game for many reasons. So Soul Raiders looks pretty compelling to me. It is sort of a campaign exploration game with various mechanics. And it is designed by the designer of Splendor, which I think is one of those really just solid games that is a part of the foundation of our entire hobby. And not only have they created this game, but they've designed a system that I think they're planning on using for more games in the future. I don't know if that means more campaigns in this universe or maybe other games with different kinds of themes. But there's potentially something happening big here. It's not just a game, it's a system. And it's by a designer that is really good and I respect a lot. So I was a little on the fence with Soul Raiders, but at the end of the day, I decided to back it for those reasons. And again, it's something that will probably feature on our Twitch channel because we are going to have at least one, maybe more nights designated for campaign games. Now in the acquired section, there's nothing. I actually did not acquire any games this period. And I think as we go forward with these videos, it will be more common that there'll be sections that will be empty because I'm going to be doing them every week. So I'm not expecting to be pledging or acquiring games every week. And there may be weeks where I'm so busy recording and editing videos that I actually don't get to play anything. So there may be empty categories from week to week, but that's okay. The purpose of this video is to get these currently running Kickstarters out when they benefit you guys. So that means we're already at the played game section, and there's only one game in here, and that is Chronicles of Crime 1900. And I've actually talked about Chronicles of Crime 1400 and 1900 fairly extensively in these videos, so I don't want to talk about it too much. I do have a first impressions video for Chronicles of Crime 1400 that you can go look at, and 1900 is much the same. They're both really, really good games, and I'd recommend them to anyone who wants to play a mystery game where you're trying to solve crimes using an app. They're very well designed. They're very well written. The cases are very well structured. So far, I've only played the tutorial and then the first case in 1900. I think I like it better than 1400 so far, but it's a little hard to say. The only big difference between the two games is that 1400 had a mechanic where you would see visions, and so you had these vision cards that would give you some clue into maybe what was happening. Those are gone in 1900, and instead you have these puzzle cards. And so you're physically trying to solve puzzles with them, kind of like you would in an unlock game or an exit game. And I like that change. I think they're going to be making another change in 2400 when that comes out. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's good of them to make just kind of enough changes from game to game to keep it fresh. But so far, I think I'm enjoying 1900 more than I did 1400. I'm not sure whether I should do a, kind of full teach and review when I finish 1400. I am trying to play it and finish 100%ing all of the cases. I don't think I'm really going to have that much more to say than I did in my first impressions video. So I may just end up doing a teach and review for 1900, but we'll see. And maybe I'll do them for both. And I think maybe having them out there for both and kind of comparing the games and rating them against each other could be helpful when people are trying to decide which one to pick out. Now, as I mentioned at the top, I am going to do a very quick channel update here of what's coming. So I am still working on some things from last week. It was just a very busy week for me. I was doing a lot of behind the scenes work and other things, so I didn't really get to put out a lot of videos in this last week, which means that this video, hopefully I'll get this edited and you'll see it today, which is Friday. If not, it'll probably come out tomorrow on Saturday. Either way, it'll be out early enough for you guys to watch this before the games that I'm talking about complete their funding. But over the course of this weekend, you probably will see my June Game of the Month video. It's a little bit late. That also means that the July Game of the Month video will be coming sooner than normal, in a couple weeks probably. And then when I get to the August Game of the Month video, I'm going to be trying to get that one out at the very beginning of September. So you're going to see maybe 3 Game of the Month videos within like a 5-week period. And then moving on from there, I'm going to try to get those Game of the Month videos out at the beginning of each month for the previous month. So like in October, you'll have the September Game of the Month video, and it should come at the very beginning of October, and then it will talk about the best games that I played in the month of September. I've just gotten a little behind on those, but that's coming very soon, the June one. Also, the Kanban EV video, which is already shot. I just need to finish editing. That'll probably come out, let's say Monday. And then I am ready to shoot a few new videos. And so hopefully next week I will shoot them and get them edited and they'll start appearing. And those include first impressions videos for Embarcadero, Kemet Blood and Sand, and Imperium Classics. Now from there, the games that I probably would be doing after that, which won't be next week, but you may see these videos start to hit in 2 weeks. And so that would be first impressions videos for Cosmic Frog, Beyond the Sun, and possibly Coffee Traders, and or this really interesting looking Indian voting game called Shasan. So it's probably unlikely you'll get 4 in 2 weeks, but very likely you'll get 3. So probably either Coffee Traders or Shasan. And then that week you'll probably also see the July Game of the Month video hit. So that's what's coming. Thank you very much for spending some time with me. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you'll know when I publish videos like this in the future. And I hope I was able to give you some information on those 5 games that are completing their funding in the next week and help you make a decision if those are games that you want to back or not. So whatever you're playing, happy gaming. I hope you're finding ways to do that right now safely. And I will see you soon in my next video. Be watching for the June Game of the Month and the Kanban EV First Impressions video. See you soon. Take care. Bye.